Hi everyone, it's Rachel here from Perinatal Wellbeing Centre. I'm one of the perinatal mental health workers, and today I'm going to be doing your Facebook Live and I'm going to be talking about self-compassion. So to start, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live. We thank them for the care that they've showed in the past, in the present and in the future. And we continue to acknowledge them and their elders and the wonderful part they play in our community. So today we are going to be talking a little bit about self-compassion and I guess why it's so important, especially at the moment when there are so many things happening that are beyond our control. So I guess when I've been looking at self-compassion and why I think self-compassion is so important is because one of the best things that we can do as parents, as partners, as friends is to look after ourselves, and self-compassion is key in doing that. So when I'm talking about self-compassion today, I'm kind of basing it off a researcher in the US called Kristen Neff. If you have any other, if you want to find out more about self-compassion and what she's done, she's got a great website, lots of information, so feel free to have a look afterwards. But the way she talks about self-compassion is that there's three parts to it. So there's a mindfulness component, a self-kindness component, and then a connectedness component. And so I'm just going to touch on them a little bit throughout the little chat today, and then at the end we're just going to look at some tips, I guess, to make sure that we're trying to be as compassionate as we can be to ourselves at the moment. So when we're thinking about self-compassion, the first thing is probably just to think about, well, what do we mean when we're talking about compassion? And compassion is about our ability as humans to connect with other people when life is hard and life is tough for them, and have empathy for them. And so when we're talking about that in regards to self-compassion, it's about having that same empathy, that same compassion, that same kindness that we show to others, to ourselves. So if we're breaking that down into the three parts, the first part that Neff, the researcher, talks about is she calls it mindfulness, but it's really just about noticing and connecting with yourself and what's going on around you, I guess. Because the challenge is that we can't show compassion to ourselves or to anyone if we don't acknowledge that there's some hard, challenging things happening for them at the time. So life is difficult, and life is difficult in many ways for many people at different times. And so by noticing that, instead of trying to fix and problem solve what's going on, we're just kind of able to acknowledge that life is tough and that it's okay to sit with that. The good thing about this, it means if something does go wrong, it means that instead of us beating ourselves up about it and going, oh my goodness, look what I've done wrong, or I should have done all these things, we can just go, man, that was a really hard situation. That's a really tough thing that's been going on for us right now. And I think at the moment, when we're at home a lot more and we're isolated from other people and we're spending a lot of close contact with our little family potentially, it's a time when we need to notice the impact of those things around us, because life is more difficult and more harder. So noticing and checking with ourselves is also checking in about how we're feeling and how we're responding to a situation as well. So what's going on externally to us as well as what's going on in our body, and just being a bit mindful of what we're doing, I guess, for ourselves. So that's kind of mindful component. So noticing that life is hard and that actually this is something that I need to be kind to myself about is the first part. The second part is being kind. So self-kindness. And I think self-kindness is the one part of these three that is the easiest to talk about, but potentially the hardest to put into practice. So we all know that it's very easy to be kind to other people at times when there's hardship that they've experienced, but so often we don't provide that same kindness to ourselves. And the challenge of that is that when we're not being kind to ourselves, it means that we get down on ourselves, and it can affect our mood. It's not really a good motivator. So if we can kind of flip around the way we talk to ourselves and talk internally, our self-talk, and look at being more positive, or just more human, I guess, in the way that we do that, and talk to ourselves how we would talk to our friend. So for example, yesterday I had a rubbish day with my kids in the morning, just was yelling and screaming, and I could make a choice where I could beat myself up about it and go, Rachel, you're an idiot. They're just kids. They're loud. They're noisy. That's just what they do. That's more of a kindness. So looking at what's going on, I could just blame myself and go, oh my goodness, Rachel, you're the worst parent in the world. Everyone else is doing better than you right now. So I guess it's about trying to flip around how we talk to each other, how we talk to ourselves as in how we would talk to each other. This is especially important. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. This is especially important when we are faced with situations that we don't have a lot of control over. So at the moment, we can't go out and do those things that we would normally do potentially to look after our mental health. We can't do the exercise classes that we do. We can't connect with friends. We can't, go for those coffee dates or dessert dates that we need so much sometimes. We're having to adapt. And that means we need to provide even more kindness to ourselves at the moment. So the third part of Kristen Neff's research. So we've had noticing, so looking at what's happening for you, talking to yourself kindly, so talking to yourself how you would talk to a friend. The third part is connecting or common humanity. And what happens is when something goes wrong in our lives, we do something that we don't like or we find something really challenging, we often internally feel like we're the only one feeling that way. But the reality is that there's lots of other people that are also having hard times and having harder experiences. And by having connectedness and having some awareness that we're not alone in our situation can actually help us to have more self-compassion for ourselves. It helps recognize that sometimes things are beyond our control, and that life is unpredictable, and we're not robots. We are humans, and that means that we can't respond to every situation in a perfect way every time. It's just absolutely impossible. And we need to, by having an awareness that things are happening for other people as well, helps take away that drive of perfectionist that sometimes that we have. It helps us to reduce isolation, which is really important. Often we feel like, oh, well, I can't be stressed or anxious. I can't be angry at this situation. But the reality is that we're human and we get that way, and other people do too. And our experience might not be exactly the same as someone else's, but it might be one that we can still connect on some level. For those of you that have been part of our groups, if you think about the things you've shared wouldn't have been exactly the same as the other people in the group, but you would have been able to connect with them on some level because everyone is experiencing hardship and suffering at some time. And it's important to acknowledge that. So that is self-compassion. It's about being aware that life is tough and that we experience life being tough. It's about then responding to these tough moments with kindness to ourselves and not talking to us in a way that beats ourselves up or makes us feel even worse about a situation. And then it's about remembering that we're not alone, that we have other people that are having challenging times as well, and that we're still connected to people, even if we're doing it over the phone or, through text messages these days. Everyone is experiencing things in different ways, but in similar ways. So they're kind of the three elements. So I guess in terms of tips of going away, if you're acknowledging to yourself that maybe you haven't been particularly kind or gentle with yourself over the last little while, for some people, being kind to yourself is really difficult. You've spent the last many, many years maybe not having a really nice way to talk about what's happening for you. And so this stuff can be hard to change, but I guess it's really important. So I challenge you to even just try it for a little bit and just try and shift your mindset around how you respond to yourself when things go wrong. So some of the tips are give yourself permission to treat yourself kindly. You are important. You are a very important part of your family, of your life, and you're an individual, and it's okay to make mistakes, and give yourself permission that if that happens, to be kind to yourself about it. Ask yourself, would my friend say this to me? Would my friend do this to me? That's really important as well. If you're finding you're having trouble, write down what you would say to a friend in a letter. Write down some of the really good qualities about yourself and stick them on the fridge. And so when you're having a moment where you're finding it hard to provide compassion to yourself, go and find that and read it and remind yourself of why you are a valuable person as well. And the most important things, don't beat yourself up, when things go wrong. Be kind to yourself, be kind to each other. It's really important to acknowledge how tough life is at the moment, and that if we can give ourselves a little hug or give ourselves a little nice pep talk, maybe that will make a little bit of the day a little bit easier. So that's my words to you. Hopefully you might have had a thought about how you're treating yourself, and I really challenge you today to go away and be as self-compassionate as you can be. See ya.